This was the fall of 1998. I taught third grade at a small elementary school outside Millhaven, Ohio. I was 29, freshly divorced, and renting a little two-bedroom house at the edge of town, right where the last street lamp stood before the road turned to gravel and ran along an old apple orchard that nobody farmed anymore. I liked the quiet out there. At least, I liked it at first. The house came with a detached garage, a chain-link fence along the side yard, and a bird feeder some previous tenant had nailed to a post near the kitchen window. I never bothered taking it down. I liked watching cardinals in the morning while I graded spelling tests and drank coffee from a chipped mug. It was a Tuesday night, I think in late September, when I heard the first sound. I was already in bed, lights off, alarm clock glowing 11:42 and red numbers on my nightstand. Something outside went clang. Metal on metal, sharp and short. I sat up and listened. Nothing else came. I told myself a raccoon had probably gotten into the feeder, and I went back to sleep. In the morning, the feeder was on the ground. The post it hung from was empty, and the little hook at the top was bent slightly outward, like something had pulled on it hard enough to warp the metal. I picked it up, brushed off the seed, and hung it back up without much thought. Raccoons are strong. That's what I told myself. 2 nights later, it happened again, but different. This time it was the side gate. I heard it swing and knock against the fence post, over and over, a slow, rusty creak followed by a soft bang. I lay there and counted 12 knocks before it stopped. In the morning, the gate was closed, not open like I expected, closed and latched, the way I always left it. That struck me as strange, but I didn't dwell on it. I had report cards due. By the second week of October, I noticed a pattern, though I didn't want to admit it yet. The sounds always started around 1:15 to midnight. They always lasted a few minutes, never longer, and they only happened on nights when my car was in the driveway. On the 2 nights I stayed late at school for parent conferences and came home after midnight, nothing happened at all. I started keeping a little notebook by my bed, the kind with a spiral top, and I wrote down what I heard each night. That was the first time I really admitted to myself that something was going on. October 14th, 3 loud taps against the kitchen window, evenly spaced. October 17th, the porch light came on by itself, then went dark again 5 minutes later, even though I never touched the switch. October 19th, my newspaper, delivered every morning by a boy named Robbie Teller, was found the next day sitting neatly on my porch step instead of thrown onto the lawn where it usually landed. Someone had picked it up and placed it there. That last one bothered me the most. Robbie always tossed it from his bike. He never got off to walk it up. When I asked him about it, he looked at me like I was odd for even bringing it up. He said he threw it same as always. A few days after that, I was flipping through the Millhaven Gazette over breakfast, the way I did most mornings, and a small item near the back caught my eye. It wasn't even a full article, just a short paragraph under the local notices, mentioning that county deputies had responded to several reports of nighttime property disturbances along the rural roads west of town over the past month. No names, no addresses, just a line asking residents to report anything unusual. I remember sitting there with my toast going cold, reading that paragraph 3 times. Whatever was happening at my house, it wasn't only happening at my house. I mentioned all of this to my neighbor, Carl Bittner, an older man who lived 2 houses down and ran the local hardware store. Carl had lived on that road for almost 30 years. He listened to me describe the sounds, the gate, the newspaper, and he got a strange look on his face I didn't understand at the time. "Orchard's been empty a long time," he said. "Kids used to dare each other to walk through it at night. Maybe somebody's still doing that." I wanted to believe him. Teenagers messing around felt a lot better than the alternative. But then came the dog. Carl had an old beagle named Duchess who slept in his fenced yard at night. Around Halloween, I started hearing her bark at almost the exact time the sounds began at my house, 11:40, 11:45. Carl told me she'd never barked at night before that fall. Something was walking the road between our houses on a schedule, and Duchess knew it before I did. Around that same time, our mail carrier, a heavy-set man named Gary, who delivered on that route for years, stopped me by the mailbox one afternoon and asked if I'd noticed a car parked along the orchard fence some mornings. He said he'd seen an old brown sedan sitting there twice in the last 2 weeks. Engine off, nobody visible inside that he could tell. Gone by the time he came back through in the afternoon. He said he almost hadn't mentioned it, figured it was nothing, but something about the way it was always parked in the exact same spot made him bring it up. I asked him if he'd gotten a plate number. He hadn't. Why would he have? It was just a car by an empty orchard until it wasn't. That Sunday night, the sounds changed again. Instead of the gate or the feeder, I woke to a slow, dragging scrape, like something heavy being pulled across the gravel driveway, followed by silence, followed by 3 sharp taps against my bedroom window, the one that faced the side yard. I did not get up. I lay there with my heart pounding until the taps stopped and didn't come again. In the morning, I found my bicycle, which I usually kept leaning against the garage, lying on its side almost 10 feet away, near the fence, its front wheel still slowly spinning when I stepped outside, as though someone had spun it and let it go only moments before I opened the door. I called the Millhaven police station on a Thursday and talked to an officer named Deputy Harmon. He was polite, wrote down what I told him, and said they'd have a patrol car swing by more often after midnight. He also told me something that stuck with me for a long time. "You're not the only one," he said. "We've had 2 other calls this year, out past the orchard, bird feeders knocked down, gates left open different than folks remembered leaving them. Nothing ever taken, nobody ever seen." He said it so plainly, like it was just another kind of weather you had to get used to living out there. I asked him what he thought it was. He said probably just somebody bored, and that most of the time these things stopped on their own. I didn't find that comforting. I found it worse somehow, knowing I wasn't the only house it had chosen. I started sleeping with my window air conditioner off, so I could hear better, even though the nights were getting cold. I started checking that my doors were locked twice instead of once. My sister Renee came to stay with me for a weekend in early November after I finally told her everything on the phone. She brought her cordless phone charger and joked that she'd bring her softball bat too, just in case, half kidding. That Friday night, with Renee asleep in the spare room, it happened again. Around 11:40, I heard the chain link fence rattle, 3 slow shakes, like someone testing whether it would hold, then quiet. Then a few minutes later, our old station wagon's back hatch, which I always kept latched, popped open on its own with a soft metallic click I heard clearly through my bedroom wall. Renee heard it too. She sat straight up in bed and asked me what that was. I didn't have an answer. In the morning, we found the hatch open, exactly as I'd heard, and on the gravel beside the driveway, a single fresh boot print, deep enough that whoever left it had stood there for a while. Small for a man's boot, but too large to be a child's. Renee wanted to call the police immediately, and I let her. Deputy Harmon came out himself that time, walked the yard with us, photographed the boot print with his own camera, one of those disposable ones from the drugstore, and told us he'd add it to the file. He also told me something new. Another house, about a mile down past the orchard, had reported almost the same thing 2 years earlier. A young nurse who lived alone. She'd moved away before Christmas that year and never filed a follow-up report. He didn't know where she'd gone. That was the first time I really let myself feel afraid, rather than just confused. Renee begged me to stay at her apartment in town for a while. I almost did. But something in me wanted to understand what was happening before I ran from it. Maybe that was foolish. I've thought about that a lot since. The following Tuesday, I decided I would sit up and watch without turning on any lights from the dark of my own living room. I moved a kitchen chair to the window that faced the side yard and the gate, turned off every light in the house, even unplugged the digital clock on the VCR so its glow wouldn't give me away, and I waited. 11:30 came and went. 11:40. I almost convinced myself nothing would happen that night, that maybe whoever it was had finally stopped. Then I saw him, not stepping into the yard, not near the gate at all. He was standing at the tree line where my side yard met the old orchard, half hidden behind the low branches of an apple tree that hadn't been pruned in years. He wasn't moving. He was just standing there, facing my house, completely still. The way a fence post is still. I couldn't make out his face in the dark, only his shape and the pale color of what looked like a work jacket. I don't know how long I sat frozen in that chair, long enough that my legs went numb. He never crossed into my yard. He never touched the gate or the fence that night. He simply stood there, watching my dark house the same way I was watching him, until, at some point I never actually witnessed, he was gone. I blinked, and the space by the tree was empty. I called Deputy Harmon first thing the next morning. Officers walked the tree line and the orchard for most of that day. They found a flattened patch of grass under the same apple tree, cigarette butts scattered around it, some fairly fresh and some old enough that they'd clearly been coming there for weeks, maybe longer than I'd even been hearing sounds. They also found a spot near the back fence where the ground was worn down into a narrow path, like someone had walked the same route enough times to wear the grass thin, a path that led, when you followed it, straight toward my kitchen window. Nobody was ever arrested. Nobody was ever even identified. Deputy Harmon told me, off the record, that in his opinion, whoever it was had wanted me to come outside that night, and probably every night before it, and that the sounds, the gate, the feeder, the hatch, all of it had been a kind of invitation. He said I was lucky I never accepted it. I moved out before Christmas that year into a small apartment above the pharmacy on Main Street, closer to town, with neighbors on both sides, and streetlights right outside my window. I never went back to that house, not even to collect the last of my things. Renee did that for me. I found out later, through the manager of the pharmacy who used to talk to everyone, that the house sat empty for almost a year before a young couple moved in. I don't know if anything ever happened to them. I never asked, and honestly, I didn't want to know. What still keeps me up some nights isn't the sounds, or even the shape by the tree line. It's the worn path in the grass, the one the police found leading straight to my kitchen window. Whoever made that path had been coming back long before that first clang of the bird feeder woke me up, long enough for the ground itself to remember his footsteps. I never learned who he was, or why he chose my house out of every house on that road. And I've never stopped wondering how many nights he stood at that tree line, watching a dark window, waiting for me to finally come outside.